Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to stately Vaughn Manor. And today is my epic comic book Wednesday. Every Wednesday, I talk about a Marvel epic collection, and Steve Donoghue on his channel talks about that same Marvel epic collection. It is our world's finest team up, which we do once a week. And this week, the epic collection I'm talking about is about a little fella called Thor. This is Thor Volume 5, The Fall of Asgard. Does Asgard really fall? Probably not, but maybe. So, this is Thor Volume 5. These stories take place in 1970 through 1971. This epic collection contains Thor 175 through 194. So this is the beginning, more or less, of the Bronze Age of comics, which ran through the 70s into the mid-80s, about, depending on who you ask. But yeah, it basically went through the 70s into the mid-80s. And so it was sort of a transitionary time of comic books. And this is a transitionary time in the Thor comic books, in the Thor series. So I don't know if you remember that I did a Marvel Epic Wednesday on the first volume of Thor, the origin of Thor, which was drawn by Jack Kirby and written by Stan Lee. That first Marvel Epic collection was a little rough. It had some good stories in there, had some really not so great stories in there, had one frankly terrible story in that first volume of Thor. But it did have some interesting stuff in there. So Thor was basically a superhero. Basically, lame Dr. Don Blake found a stick, and when he bangs the stick, he becomes Thor. He has the power of Thor. So he basically becomes Thor. And eventually, we learn that Thor actually is Thor. He's the real Thor, the mythological Thor, the son of Odin, from Asgard. And the early Thor comics had a backup feature called Tales of Asgard, which told some backstory of Asgard and talked about Thor's childhood. And so it really leaned heavy into the fantasy elements, the mythological elements of Thor. And that is when the book finally found itself, more or less. It was kind of floundering around for a while, Thor. But once they started leaning into the fantasy elements, once they started to focus on the mythology, Asgard, the other gods, the Warriors 3, Loki, Sif, all the Asgardians, then this book really hit its stride. And Jack Kirby, his artwork was amazing in Thor. It just kept getting better. And I think some of his very best artwork was in the Thor comic book. I mean, it might not be the best thing he ever did. I mean, obviously that was Common D, the last boy on Earth for DC Comics. Obviously that was the best thing that Jack Kirby ever did, or maybe that's just me. But he was pretty great on Thor too. And Thor was amazing. It could be his best work. It could be. Man, that's a tough call. It's a tough call what Jack Kirby's best work was. It was certainly some of his best work, though, because he had the opportunity to really release his full imagination to create Asgard and the Asgardians. Now, why I say that this is a transitionary period in Thor is because this is the volume, and this is the reason why I chose it, where the artist changes. It goes basically from Jack Kirby to John Buscema, with a few issues of Neil Adams in there too. So this is artistically a fantastic volume. And the stories are pretty good too. Hey, can you just stop making noise? I'm trying to do my Marvel Epic Wednesday. So anyway, yes. And so this is kind of a transitionary period. So we start off with Jack Kirby. And we've got just some magnificent Jack Kirby artwork. Now, as you can see, just looking at this, this is the period where Jack Kirby is just magnificent. Now, through his issues from the beginning, once he started leaning into the mythology, his artwork has just been fantastic the whole way. And so you can just see some of that great fantasy artwork in these, which are some of his last issues. And we get to see so many great Asgardian characters. There's the beautiful Sif there. But what errand brings thee here, my lady? And it's just great stuff. And of course, by this point, Thor is talking Thor. In the first issue, or first few issues, he didn't talk Thor. You know, he didn't do his faux Shakespeare talk, which is great. But here he is full on Jack Kirby, melodramatic, Shakespearean talking Thor, and fighting fantastic fantasy villains. And we've got the evil Loki scheming. And this epic collection really leans heavy on the Asgardian stuff. And so we see so many of the great Asgardians, like the Warriors 3 and the evil the evil Loki at his most fiendish. Look at that guy. Man, that's pretty great. None may dare tell Loki nay. And yeah, and so we also get Jack Kirby's suitor, who's always trying to bring about the apocalypse. Now, another interesting thing in here, we have a couple different inkers. We do have Vince Colletta, who makes Thor look very interesting. He's always has kind of an interesting look for his work with Jack Kirby, and he did a lot of that on Thor. And people have mixed opinions about his inking on Thor. Some people just don't like it at all, but I happen to think it's kind of cool. There's something about it that I like. From what I remember, I don't know. Look at that. I think he just gives everything a really cool look. Inkers can make a huge difference. And I think this one just does such a unique and interesting job. Especially when we get Suitor, the god of the flame. Like I said, always trying to bring around Ragnarok. We get a lot of that in this epic collection. Asgard is in tremendous danger throughout the whole of this in one form or another. So here we get the introduction of John Buscema. Properly magnificent. Now, John Buscema, fantastic artist. He had already, at this point, I believe, done the Silver Surfer. He had drawn the Avengers. He's been working since at least the 50s. And he was just an incredible artist. So when it came to somebody that was going to take over for Jack Kirby, I really don't know that you could have chosen a better artist. John Buscema was never thrilled with drawing superhero comics. He did it really, really well. But it wasn't something he particularly liked. He liked doing other things, which is why he loved drawing Conan so much. So he was there for that one issue, and then Jack Kirby comes back briefly before I think Neil Adams comes in after that. Look, romance. But John Buscema, yeah, he eventually went on and he did Conan, and he loved doing Conan. Conan was like the perfect thing for him. Straight up fantasy adventure comic book. That's what he liked to do, is that kind of thing where he could make a bunch of historical looking backgrounds and characters. That was his thing. He liked that. And he got a chance to do a bunch of non-superhero stuff in Thor. So we got some last little bit of Jack Kirby's Thor, and then we get Neil Adams for a bit. Neil Adams, who is a legendary comic book writer, comic book artist, and he's probably most legendary for doing some of the best Batman stories that have ever been done. Before this, for Marvel, look at that. That's just great. Before this, for Marvel, he's already done X-Men. He's already done the Avengers, I believe. Or did he? Or was that later? Steve Donoghue would know. He was around at that time. I was just very itty-bitty. He might have done Avengers after this. Man, I can't remember. Steve Donoghue will tell us. But he's a great, great artist. And he does a really good job in this. I don't know if it was his best stuff, but it was pretty good. And of course, we get the evil Mephisto. Mephisto, the guy Marvel got to destroy Peter Parker's life many, many, many years later. The evil Mephisto, who's always warping reality. And so we get some more Neil Adams. Very melodramatic Neil Adams. But eventually, if I can find it, get back to John Buscema. A very moody, fantastic John Buscema. And he's fighting Dr. Doom here. The really good stuff, though, in this particular epic collection, he has some adventures. But I think the really great stuff in this particular epic collection is towards the end. We get some really fantastic stuff as soon as the goddess of death shows up, Hela. Now, if you had seen a particular Thor movie that came out a few years ago, I think it was the third Thor movie? It was the third Thor movie when Hela showed up. She is the goddess of death. She is fantastic. We get some great John Buscema artwork here. I mean, he's just right out of the gate on Thor. He was fantastic. He was great at the melodramatic panels like that, which he used to such great effect later on. And Hela is just such a great character. A fantastic Jack Kirby design, which Buscema just pulls off really, really well. And this could have gone, when Jack Kirby left this book, it could have really, really gone downhill. It could have frankly gone to hell if they had chosen the wrong artist. But they did not. They did not choose the wrong artist. They chose the right guy to take over. Because just look at some of this stuff. It's awesome. Every character just looks magnificent. I know, you're upset that Jack Kirby left, but what do? Got some great melodramatic panels like that with all our Asgardian friends. And you'll see there are some shots in our puny man's world, the puny world of humans. But most of this is just centered around Asgardian adventure and fantasy adventure. As Asgard is threatened by Hela and by Loki and Suitor before that. But yeah, mostly her. I mean, she's just scary looking. Good job, Jack Kirby, on coming up with this. And even Odin's looking fantastic there. Odin's pretty impressive. Not the brightest character. I know he's supposed to be the brilliant Allfather. Not always, though. Loki seemed to fool him often. But, yeah. I mean, just these kind of melodramatic and yet quiet panels show up in this comic. I really think that on the time that John Buscema was on here, it was pretty special in a lot of ways. And it had some just beautiful, beautiful stuff in it. And the stories themselves, they hold up all the way through. I mean, so even after Jack left, Thor was a fantastic comic book. Jack Kirby had spent enough time on the book that he laid a really great foundation, and we got the Silver Surfer. John Buscema had drawn the Silver Surfer and did a magnificent job, and so he brings the Surfer back here. But it was a really magnificent time on Thor, and the transition just really, really worked. Like I said, when you change artists on a book, you never know how it's going to go. And if it goes badly, people stop buying it, you know? And it was a big chance. I mean, Jack Kirby had some pretty intense fans. And, you know, once he left the book, people might have left. But they got the right guy, John Buscema, who's just fantastic at doing this kind of fantasy adventure artwork. So I'll wrap it up. My talk about Thor, the Fall of Asgard. Excuse me if I rambled a bit more than usual, but I had a long work day. But this is a great epic collection, I think. I think even Steve Donoghue will agree, but we'll see. We'll wait and see what Steve Donoghue thinks. Pretty sure he likes this stuff. I mean, it's just, like I said, leans heavy in the Asgardian stuff, heavy on the fantasy, great melodrama, brilliant art, solid stories by Stan Lee. It's all really, really good stuff. And this one, the 5th Epic Collection. So yeah, there you go. That's it for this week. I will catch you next week when we talk about Captain America once again. Okay, guys, I'll catch you next time.